Single white woman adopts black triplets, then freezes when she discovers their true identity. Sarah Mitchell stood in the doorway of the nursery, a soft smile playing on her lips as she watched the 3 cribs, each containing a peacefully sleeping baby. At 35, Sarah had finally achieved her dream of motherhood, though not in the way she had originally envisioned. Born and raised in a small, predominantly white Midwestern town, Sarah had always felt a calling to make a difference in the world. Her parents, both teachers, had instilled in her a strong sense of social justice and the importance of education. This led her to pursue a career in social work, specializing in child welfare. Years of working in the system had opened Sarah's eyes to the challenges faced by children in foster care, particularly children of color. The disproportionate number of black children waiting for adoption had struck a chord with her, and she had made it her mission to advocate for these often overlooked kids. Sarah's decision to adopt had come after years of unsuccessful attempts to conceive and a painful divorce. Her ex-husband, unable to cope with the stress of infertility treatments, and Sarah's growing obsession with her work, had left her for a younger woman. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also strengthened Sarah's resolve to create the family she had always wanted, on her own terms. When the opportunity to adopt African-American triplets came up, Sarah hadn't hesitated. Despite raised eyebrows from some members of her community and concerned questions from her parents about her ability to handle 3 babies on her own, Sarah had pushed forward. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to provide a loving home for these children who had already faced so much adversity in their short lives. Now, a month into her new role as a mother, Sarah was exhausted but happier than she had ever been. Jamal, Aisha, and Marcus, barely 3 months old, had quickly become the center of her world. Every smile, every coo, every milestone, no matter how small, filled her heart with joy. As she stood watching over her sleeping children, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. She knew there would be challenges ahead. Raising 3 children as a single mother was daunting enough, but she was also acutely aware of the additional complexities that came with being a white mother to black children. But in this moment, looking at the peaceful faces of her babies, Sarah felt ready to face whatever came their way. Little did she know that her newfound happiness and sense of purpose were about to be challenged in ways she could never have anticipated. The day that would change everything started like any other in the Mitchell household. Sarah woke at dawn to the sound of Aisha's cries, signaling the start of the carefully orchestrated routine she had developed over the past month. Feed, change, soothe, repeat, a dance she performed with increasing confidence as the days went by. As she moved through the morning, juggling bottles and diapers with the efficiency of a seasoned parent, Sarah couldn't help but smile. Despite the exhaustion that seemed to have taken up permanent residence in her bones, she felt a deep sense of contentment. The triplets, each developing their own distinct personality, never failed to bring joy to her day. It was mid-morning when Sarah, having finally managed to get all 3 babies down for a nap, sank gratefully onto the couch for a moment of peace. She was just about to close her eyes when a movement outside the window caught her attention. A large, black SUV with tinted windows had pulled up in front of her house. Sarah frowned, not recognizing the vehicle. In their small town, unfamiliar cars were a rarity, and something about this one set her nerves on edge. She watched as the driver's door opened and a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark suit stepped out. He surveyed the house for a moment before moving to the passenger side and opening the door. A woman emerged, her designer outfit and perfectly coiffed hair a stark contrast to Sarah's yoga pants and messy bun. Sarah's heart began to race as the couple made their way up her front walk. Were they from social services? Had there been some mistake with the adoption? 1,000 scenarios, each more terrifying than the last, raced through her mind. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Sarah moved to the door, opening it just as the man raised his hand to knock. "Can I help you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm despite the fear churning in her stomach. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sarah Mitchell? I'm James Carter, and this is my wife Evelyn. We're here about the children." Sarah felt her blood run cold. My children? I don't understand. The adoption is finalized. There were no other family members. Evelyn stepped forward, her expression a mixture of sympathy and determination. Ms. Mitchell, there's been a complication. May we come in? This is a delicate matter. Numbly, Sarah stepped aside, allowing the Carters to enter her home. As she led them to the living room, her mind raced. What could they possibly want? What complication could there be? Once they were seated, James leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him. Miss Mitchell, we understand you recently adopted triplets. African-American triplets. Sarah nodded, her throat too dry to speak. The truth is, James continued, those children are our grandchildren. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Sarah processed his words. But that's not possible. The social worker said there was no family. We didn't know, Evelyn interjected, her voice soft but firm. Our son, he didn't tell us about the pregnancy. We only found out recently, after he passed away. Sarah's mind reeled. The birth parents' deaths had been a tragic part of the triplets' story, a car accident that had left them orphaned at just a few weeks old. But no one had mentioned any surviving family. We've spent the last month tracking them down, James explained. It wasn't easy, but once we found out about the adoption, we knew we had to come. What are you saying? Sarah managed to ask, though she feared she already knew the answer. The Carters exchanged a look before Evelyn spoke. We want our grandchildren, Miss Mitchell. We're here to take them home. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Take them home. The babies she had fed, changed, soothed, and loved for the past month. The children she had already come to think of as her own. No, she whispered, then louder. No, you can't. The adoption is final. They're my children now. James's expression hardened. We're prepared to fight this legally if we have to, Miss Mitchell. But we hoped you would understand. They're our flesh and blood, our son's legacy. Surely you can see why we need to raise them. As the Carters continued to speak, outlining their plans and their legal rights, Sarah felt as if she were underwater, their words muffled and distant. All she could think about were the 3 sleeping babies in the next room, blissfully unaware that their world, and hers, was about to be turned upside down. In that moment, as the life she had built over the past month threatened to crumble around her, Sarah knew she was facing the fight of her life. A fight for her children, for her family, and for the future she had dared to dream of. The battle lines were drawn, and Sarah Mitchell was prepared to do whatever it took to keep her babies safe and with her, where they belonged. As the initial shock of the Carters' announcement began to wear off, Sarah's social worker instincts kicked in. She needed more information, and she needed it now. I'm sorry, she said, her voice steadier than she felt, but I need to understand this better. You said your son was the father? How can you be sure? James reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. We have DNA tests, he explained, handing the documents to Sarah. Conducted without your knowledge, I'm afraid. We had to be certain before we approached you. Sarah's hands shook as she opened the folder. The papers inside were official-looking, filled with scientific jargon, but the conclusion was clear. The DNA was a match. The Carters were indeed the triplets' biological grandparents. As she processed this information, another realization struck Sarah. Wait, she said, looking up at the couple. If you're their grandparents and you only found out about them recently, does that mean you never knew their mother either? A flash of pain crossed Evelyn's face. No, she admitted softly. We didn't know her. Our son, he left home young. We hadn't spoken in years. We didn't even know he was in a relationship. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the situation. Sarah's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information. So you never met the mother, never knew about the pregnancy. How did you find out about the triplets at all? James and Evelyn exchanged a look before James spoke. It was a deathbed confession of sorts. Our son was involved in some dangerous activities. When he realized he was dying, he reached out to make amends. He told us about the babies, about their mother. But by the time we tracked them down, they had already been put up for adoption. Sarah finished, understanding dawning. But why didn't you come forward then? Why wait a month? We needed time, Evelyn explained, her voice thick with emotion. To grieve, to process everything, and to decide if we were ready for this responsibility. We're not young, Miss Mitchell. Taking on 3 infants, it's not a decision we made lightly. Sarah sat back, her mind whirling with this new information. On one hand, she could understand the Carters' position. They had lost their son, and the triplets represented a connection to him, a chance to honor his memory. But on the other hand, have you considered what's best for the children? Sarah asked, her protective instincts flaring. They've already been through so much change in their short lives. Uprooting them now? We understand your concern, James interjected. But they're our family. We can provide for them, give them a connection to their heritage, their roots. As the conversation continued, Sarah found herself torn. Her heart ached at the thought of losing the triplets, but her social worker training forced her to consider all angles. The Carters seemed genuine in their desire to raise their grandchildren, and they could offer advantages that Sarah, as a single mother, might struggle with. But as she listened to the Carters talk about their plans, about private schools and trust funds, Sarah felt a growing unease. They spoke of the triplets as if they were possessions to be claimed, not individual beings with needs and personalities that Sarah had come to know intimately over the past month. In that moment, Sarah made a discovery about herself. She realized that her love for Jamal, Aisha, and Marcus went beyond the bonds of biology. She wasn't just their caretaker, she was their mother in every way that mattered. And she would fight with everything she had to keep them safe and loved. As the Carters continued to make their case, Sarah's resolve strengthened. She didn't know how, but she knew she had to find a way to keep her family together. The battle ahead would be difficult, but as she thought of the 3 sleeping babies in the next room, Sarah knew it was a fight she was willing to take on. The revelation of the triplets' biological connection to the Carters had changed everything, but it had also crystallized Sarah's determination. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, for the sake of the children she loved more than life itself. As the Carters' words hung heavily in the air, Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for the battle ahead. In that moment, she made a decision that would alter the course of not just her life, but the lives of Jamal, Isha, and Marcus as well. She would fight to keep her children, no matter the cost. I understand your position, Sarah began, her voice calm but firm, but I need you to understand mine. Those 3 babies in there, they're my children, not by blood, but by choice, by love, and by law. The adoption is final, and I have no intention of giving them up. The Carters' faces hardened at her words. James leaned forward, his tone taking on a menacing edge. Miss Mitchell, I don't think you understand the resources we have at our disposal. We're prepared to take this to court, to fight this all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to. Sarah felt a flicker of fear at his words, but she pushed it down. And I'm prepared to meet you there, she responded, her chin lifting defiantly. Those children need stability, love, and understanding. They need someone who sees them as individuals, not as a legacy to be claimed. Evelyn's eyes flashed with anger. Are you implying we don't love our grandchildren? That we can't provide for them? I'm saying, Sarah countered, that love is more than DNA and provision. It's sleepless nights and first smiles. It's knowing which cry means hunger and which means fatigue. It's a bond that's been forming since the moment I held them in my arms. Can you say the same? The room fell silent as the weight of Sarah's words sank in. Finally, James spoke, his voice cold. You'll be hearing from our lawyers, Miss Mitchell. We suggest you find good representation. As the Carters left, Sarah sank onto the couch, the full impact of her decision washing over her. She had just committed to a legal battle against a couple who clearly had significant financial resources. As a single mother working in social services, she knew the fight ahead would be daunting. The consequences of her decision began to unfold almost immediately. The next day, Sarah received a formal letter from the Carters' high-powered law firm outlining their intent to challenge the adoption. The legal jargon was intimidating, full of terms like biological rights and presumption of paternity. Sarah's first step was to secure her own legal representation. She reached out to an old college friend, Michael Chang, who had become a family law attorney. When she explained the situation, Michael agreed to take her case pro bono, but he didn't sugarcoat the challenges they faced. Sarah, he said during their first meeting, I need you to understand what you're up against. The Carters have money and societal privilege on their side. They can argue that they can provide a two-parent household, financial stability, and a connection to the triplets' cultural heritage. It's going to be an uphill battle." Sarah nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I understand, Michael, but I have to try. Those children are my world." As news of the impending legal battle spread, Sarah found her life turning upside down. Some members of her community rallied around her, offering support and encouragement. Others, however, began to question her decision. "Is it really fair to deprive those children of their biological family?" one neighbor asked during a tense encounter at the grocery store. "Don't you think they'd be better off with their own kind?" The thinly veiled racism in such comments made Sarah's blood boil, strengthening her resolve to protect her children from such narrow-minded attitudes. At work, Sarah's boss called her into his office, his expression grave. "Sarah, I need you to understand that this situation could reflect poorly on our agency. We can't afford to be seen as obstructing a biological family's rights." The implied threat to her job was clear, adding financial stress to the emotional toll she was already under. But Sarah refused to back down. "I understand," she said firmly, "but I will not give up my children. If that's a problem, I'll tender my resignation now." Her boss backpedaled quickly, not wanting to lose a valuable employee, but the tension remained. Sarah knew her career might never recover from this, but in her mind it was a small price to pay for her family. The most difficult consequence of her decision, however, was the strain it put on her relationship with her parents. They had been supportive of her decision to adopt, but the looming legal battle left them concerned. "Honey," her mother said during a tearful phone call, "are you sure about this? It's not too late to reconsider. Maybe the Carters are right. Maybe the children would be better off with their biological family." Sarah's heart broke at her mother's words, but she stood firm. "Mom, I love you, but you're wrong. Those children are my family. Biology doesn't define family. Love does, and I love them more than anything in this world." The conversation ended on a strained note, leaving Sarah feeling more alone than ever. But as she went to check on the triplets, their peaceful faces as they slept reaffirmed her decision. She would face whatever came their way, no matter the personal cost. As the legal proceedings began, Sarah's life became a whirlwind of depositions, court appearances, and strategy sessions with Michael. The Carters' legal team was aggressive, seeking to paint Sarah as an unfit mother due to her single status and lack of cultural connection to the triplets' heritage. Sarah's finances took a significant hit. Even with Michael working pro bono, the associated costs of the legal battle, court fees, expert witnesses, time off work, quickly depleted her savings. She was forced to take out a second mortgage on her home and max out her credit cards just to keep afloat. The stress began to take a toll on her health. Sarah lost weight, developed insomnia, and found herself constantly on edge, but she refused to let it affect her parenting. No matter how exhausted she was, she made sure the triplets were always well cared for, loved, and nurtured. As the case gained media attention, Sarah found herself thrust into the spotlight. Some news outlets portrayed her as a heroic mother fighting for her children, while others questioned her motives and ability to raise Black children in a predominantly white community. The attention brought unexpected allies. A group of transracial adoptees reached out, offering support and sharing their own positive experiences of being raised by white parents. Their stories gave Sarah hope and strengthened her resolve. However, it also brought new challenges. Sarah began receiving hate mail from both white supremacists angry at her for adopting Black children and Black activists who accused her of cultural appropriation. She was forced to increase security measures at her home and install cameras to ensure the triplets' safety. Despite the mounting pressure, Sarah remained committed to her decision. She threw herself into learning more about African American culture and history, determined to ensure that Jamal, Isha, and Marcus would grow up with a strong connection to their heritage. She reached out to Black community leaders in nearby cities, seeking guidance on how to raise Black children in a white community. These connections not only provided valuable insights, but also began to build a support network that would prove crucial in the months to come. As the court date approached, Sarah faced her greatest challenge yet. The Carters' legal team offered a settlement, joint custody, with the triplets splitting their time between Sarah and the Carters. It was a tempting offer, one that would end the financial and emotional strain of the court battle. For a moment, Sarah wavered. The idea of a peaceful resolution was appealing, and she couldn't deny that having the Carters involved in the triplets' lives could provide benefits she couldn't offer on her own. But as she thought about the proposal, Sarah realized that it wasn't in the best interest of the children. At their young age, the constant back and forth would be disruptive and confusing. Moreover, she feared that the Carters' wealth and influence would gradually push her out of her children's lives. With a heavy heart but unwavering conviction, Sarah declined the offer. "We'll see this through in court," she told Michael. "It's all or nothing now." Her decision to push forward with the trial was met with mixed reactions. Some praised her dedication, while others criticized her for putting the children through a protracted legal battle. As the trial date loomed, Sarah found herself at a crossroads. She had made her decision to fight for her children, but the consequences had been far-reaching and profound. Her career was in jeopardy, her finances were in ruins, her relationships were strained, and her future was uncertain. Yet as she looked at Jamal, Aisha, and Marcus, now babbling and reaching for her with bright smiles, Sarah knew she would make the same choice again in a heartbeat. They were her children, her family, and she would move heaven and earth to keep them safe and loved. The road ahead would be difficult, but Sarah was prepared to face whatever challenges came her way. She had made her decision, accepted the consequences, and was ready to fight for her family with everything she had. As Sarah's legal battle with the Carters dominated her life, a secondary plot began to unfold in the background, centered around her best friend and neighbor, Lisa Rodriguez. Lisa, a second-generation Mexican-American and fellow social worker, had been Sarah's rock throughout the adoption process and the subsequent legal challenges. She had been there for late-night strategy sessions, emergency babysitting, and much-needed shoulders to cry on. But as the stress of the situation mounted, Lisa found herself grappling with her own internal conflict. On one hand, she wholeheartedly supported Sarah and believed in the family they had created. On the other, as a woman of color, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease at the idea of white parents raising children of a different race. This conflict came to a head when Lisa's parents came to visit. Her mother, Elena, was horrified at the idea of Sarah adopting black children. "It's not right," Elena insisted in rapid-fire Spanish. "Those children should be with their own people. How will they learn their culture, their history?" Lisa found herself torn between defending her friend and acknowledging the validity of her mother's concerns. The conversation sparked a deep introspection about her own identity and the complexities of race in America. Determined to better understand the situation, Lisa began researching transracial adoption. She reached out to adult adoptees, joined online forums, and attended workshops on cultural competency. What she discovered was a nuanced and often contentious issue with no easy answers. As Lisa delved deeper into her research, she started to see Sarah's situation in a new light. She realized that while the concerns about cultural identity were valid, they weren't insurmountable. What mattered most was a loving home and parents committed to honoring and nurturing their children's heritage. Armed with this new perspective, Lisa decided to take a more active role in supporting Sarah's case. She approached Michael, Sarah's lawyer, with an idea. "What if we could show the court that Sarah has a strong support system in place to help the triplets connect with their culture?" She suggested. "I could testify about the efforts Sarah's making, the resources she's accessing." Michael was intrigued. "That could be powerful," he agreed, "especially coming from a person of color. It could help counter the Carters' argument about cultural connection." As Lisa prepared for her potential testimony, she found herself becoming more involved in the triplets' lives. She started teaching Sarah words and phrases in Spanish, reasoning that exposing the children to multiple cultures would only benefit them. She introduced Sarah to diverse children's books and multicultural toys. But Lisa's involvement didn't come without consequences. Some members of her extended family accused her of betraying her culture by supporting a white woman's adoption of black children. She found herself engaged in heated debates at family gatherings, struggling to explain the complexities of the situation. At work, Lisa's advocacy for Sarah began to attract attention. Their supervisor called her in for a meeting, expressing concern about her objectivity. "You need to be careful, Lisa," he warned. This situation could be seen as a conflict of interest. Despite these challenges, Lisa remained committed to supporting Sarah and the triplets. She began to see her role not just as a supportive friend, but as a cultural bridge, helping to create a rich, diverse environment for the children to grow up in. As the court date approached, Lisa's secondary story began to intertwine more closely with Sarah's main narrative. Her research, her personal growth, and her unwavering support would prove to be crucial elements in the fight to keep the triplets with Sarah. This secondary plot served to deepen the narrative, highlighting the complex issues surrounding transracial adoption and adding layers of cultural perspective to the central story. It also set the stage for a powerful testimony that could potentially turn the tide in Sarah's favor. As the legal battle raged on, the relationships in Sarah's life underwent significant transformations. The stress of the situation acted as a crucible, testing the strength of her connections and forging new bonds in unexpected places. Sarah's relationship with her parents, initially strained by their doubts about her decision to fight for the triplets, began to evolve. As they witnessed Sarah's unwavering dedication and the obvious love between her and the children, their perspectives slowly shifted. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, Sarah received an unexpected call from her father. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "I want you to know that your mother and I were proud of you. We may not have understood at first, but we see now. Those are our grandchildren, and we'll do whatever it takes to help you keep them." This declaration of support marked a turning point. Sarah's parents began to take a more active role, offering childcare during court dates and even dipping into their retirement savings to help with legal fees. The shared goal of keeping the family together strengthened their bond, healing old wounds and creating a deeper understanding between them. Sarah's relationship with Lisa also deepened and evolved. As Lisa grappled with her own cultural identity and the complexities of transracial adoption, their friendship was tested. There were difficult conversations and moments of tension as they navigated sensitive issues of race and privilege. One particularly heated discussion stood out in Sarah's memory. "How can you be sure you're doing the right thing?" Lisa had asked, frustration evident in her voice. "How do you know you can give these kids everything they need? Not just love, but a connection to their culture, their history." The question had stung, but it also forced Sarah to confront her own limitations and biases. Instead of becoming defensive, she listened. She asked questions. She sought to understand Lisa's perspective. This willingness to learn and grow strengthened their friendship. Lisa became not just a supporter, but a partner in Sarah's journey to create a culturally rich environment for the triplets. Their relationship evolved into a beautiful example of intercultural friendship, demonstrating the power of open dialogue and mutual respect. Perhaps the most profound relationship development occurred between Sarah and the triplets. As the babies grew and their personalities began to emerge, the bond between mother and children deepened in ways Sarah had never imagined possible. Jamal, the oldest by 2 minutes, was a natural leader, always first to try new things. Sarah delighted in his curiosity, the way his eyes lit up with each new discovery. Aisha, the middle child, was the peacemaker, already showing signs of empathy as she tried to comfort her siblings when they cried. And Marcus, the youngest, was the comedian of the group, his belly laughs filling the house with joy. As Sarah fought to keep her family together, she found herself falling more deeply in love with each child's unique spirit. The legal battle, draining as it was, only served to strengthen her resolve and deepen her commitment to her children. One night, as Sarah sat in the nursery, Aisha in her arms and the boys asleep in their cribs, she was struck by an overwhelming sense of rightness. Despite the challenges they faced, despite the uncertain future, she knew with unshakable certainty that this was her family. These were her children, and no court ruling could change that fundamental truth. Surprisingly, even Sarah's relationship with the Carters began to shift as the case progressed. During cross-examinations and courthouse encounters, she caught glimpses of their pain, their genuine desire to connect with their grandchildren. While she remained firm in her conviction that the triplets belonged with her, Sarah began to consider ways to include the Carters in the children's lives, should she win the case. This empathy extended to her interactions with her colleagues and community members. As she navigated the complexities of raising Black children in a predominantly white community, Sarah found herself building new relationships with people from diverse backgrounds. She joined a support group for transracial adoptive parents, forming friendships that provided both emotional support and practical advice. Even some of those who had initially questioned her decision began to come around. Sarah's unwavering commitment and obvious love for the triplets won over many skeptics. Neighbors who had once whispered behind her back now offered childcare and home-cooked meals. As the court case neared its conclusion, Sarah found herself surrounded by a network of support she could never have imagined when she first made the decision to adopt. These relationships, strengthened by adversity, deepened by shared purpose, and enriched by diversity, had become the bedrock of her new family life. The journey had been difficult, but it had led Sarah to a place of profound connection with her children, her family, her friends, and her community. Whatever the outcome of the case, she knew that these relationships would sustain her and the triplets through any challenges that lay ahead. The day of the final court hearing arrived, bringing with it a palpable tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the courthouse. Sarah, dressed in a conservative suit that felt foreign after months of baby food-stained t-shirts, sat at the defendant's table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. Across the aisle, the Carters sat with their legal team, their expressions a mix of determination and barely concealed anxiety. The courtroom was packed, filled with family, friends, reporters, and curious onlookers drawn by the high-profile nature of the case. As the judge entered and the proceedings began, Sarah felt as if she were watching from outside her body. She listened as both legal teams presented their final arguments, the words washing over her in a blur of legal jargon and emotional appeals. The Carters' lawyer painted a picture of loving grandparents denied their biological right to raise their sons' children. He spoke of cultural heritage, of the importance of blood ties, and of the financial security the Carters could provide. When it was Michael's turn to speak, he approached the bench with a quiet confidence that helped calm Sarah's nerves. He spoke eloquently of the bond between Sarah and the triplets, of the stable and loving home she had provided. He presented evidence of Sarah's efforts to connect the children with their cultural heritage, including testimony from Lisa and letters from community leaders. "Your Honor," Michael concluded, "family is not defined by blood alone. It's defined by love, by commitment, by the day-to-day acts of care that Ms. Mitchell has provided these children from the moment they came into her life. Uprooting them now, separating them from the only mother they've known, would cause irreparable harm." As Michael sat down, the judge called for a brief recess before delivering her verdict. Sarah felt as if she could hardly breathe as she waited, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Even some of those who had initially questioned her decision began to come around. Sarah's unwavering commitment and obvious love for the triplets won over many skeptics. Neighbors who had once whispered behind her back now offered childcare and home-cooked meals. As the court case neared its conclusion, Sarah found herself surrounded by a network of support she could never have imagined when she first made the decision to adopt. These relationships, strengthened by adversity, deepened by shared purpose, and enriched by diversity, had become the bedrock of her new family life. The journey had been difficult, but it had led Sarah to a place of profound connection with her children, her family, her friends, and her community. Whatever the outcome of the case, she knew that these relationships would sustain her and the triplets through any challenges that lay ahead. The day of the final court hearing arrived, bringing with it a palpable tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the courthouse. Sarah, dressed in a conservative suit that felt foreign after months of baby food-stained t-shirts, sat at the defendant's table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. Across the aisle, the Carters sat with their legal team, their expressions a mix of determination and barely concealed anxiety. The courtroom was packed, filled with family, friends, reporters, and curious onlookers drawn by the high-profile nature of the case. As the judge entered and the proceedings began, Sarah felt as if she were watching from outside her body. She listened as both legal teams presented their final arguments, the words washing over her in a blur of legal jargon and emotional appeals. The Carters' lawyer painted a picture of loving grandparents, denied their biological right to raise their son's children. He spoke of cultural heritage, of the importance of blood ties, and of the financial security the Carters could provide. When it was Michael's turn to speak, he approached the bench with a quiet confidence that helped calm Sarah's nerves. He spoke eloquently of the bond between Sarah and the triplets, of the stable and loving home she had provided. He presented evidence of Sarah's efforts to connect the children with their cultural heritage, including testimony from Lisa and letters from community leaders. Your Honor, Michael concluded, family is not defined by blood alone. It's defined by love, by commitment, by the day-to-day acts of care that Ms. Mitchell has provided these children from the moment they came into her life. Uprooting them now, separating them from the only mother they've known, would cause irreparable harm. As Michael sat down, the judge called for a brief recess before delivering her verdict. Sarah felt as if she could hardly breathe as she waited, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. When the judge returned, the courtroom fell into a hushed silence. In the case of Carter versus Mitchell, the judge began, her voice steady and authoritative, I have carefully considered all the evidence presented. This is not a simple case of biology versus adoption. It is a complex matter that requires us to consider what is truly in the best interest of these three young children. Sarah's heart pounded so loudly, she was sure everyone in the courtroom must be able to hear it. She felt Lisa's hand slip into hers, a silent offer of support. While I sympathize with the Carters' desire to connect with their grandchildren, the judge continued, I cannot ignore the strong bond that has formed between Ms. Mitchell and the triplets. Nor can I disregard the stable and loving environment she has provided. Sarah hardly dared to breathe, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. Furthermore, the judge went on, I am impressed by Ms. Mitchell's demonstrated commitment to honoring the children's cultural heritage and fostering connections within the African American community. It is my judgment that the best interest of Jamal, Aisha, and Marcus will be served by remaining in the custody of Sarah Mitchell. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of cheers and gasps. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief, tears streaming down her face as Lisa enveloped her in a tight hug. Across the aisle, she saw the Carters' faces crumple in disappointment and grief. But the judge wasn't finished. However, she added, raising her voice above the commotion, I am also ordering that the Carters be granted visitation rights. These children deserve the opportunity to know their biological family, and I believe that with time and effort, all parties can work together in the best interest of Jamal, Aisha, and Marcus. As the judge's gavel fell, bringing the case to a close, Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions wash over her. Relief, joy, and vindication mingled with empathy for the Carters' pain and apprehension about the road ahead. This climactic moment marked not an ending, but a new beginning. The legal battle was over, but the challenge of building a unique, blended family was just beginning. As Sarah left the courtroom, her heart full and her mind racing, she knew that the real work of creating a loving, inclusive family for her children was only just beginning. In the weeks following the court's decision, Sarah found herself navigating uncharted waters as she attempted to honor the judge's ruling and integrate the Carters into the triplets' lives. The initial meetings were tense and awkward, with both parties unsure of how to interact with each other. Sarah, determined to make the situation work for the sake of the children, took the initiative to set up a schedule for the Carters' visits. She prepared a detailed calendar, allocating time for the grandparents to spend with the triplets while ensuring it didn't disrupt the baby's routines. The first visit was particularly challenging. The Carters arrived at Sarah's home, their faces a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Sarah had spent hours preparing, ensuring the house was spotless and the triplets were fed and rested. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter." Sarah greeted them at the door, forcing a smile. "Please, come in. The babies are excited to meet you." As the Carters entered the living room where the triplets were playing on a colorful mat, Sarah felt a pang in her heart. This was the moment she had both anticipated and dreaded, watching another set of adults bond with her children. To her surprise, it was Evelyn Carter who broke the ice. Kneeling down beside Aisha, she spoke softly. "Hello, little one. I'm your grandma. You look so much like your daddy when he was a baby." The genuine emotion in Evelyn's voice touched Sarah, reminding her that despite their differences, they all wanted what was best for the children. Over the next few hours, Sarah observed as the Carters interacted with the triplets. She answered their questions about the baby's routines, likes, and dislikes, and even shared some funny anecdotes about their personalities. As the visit drew to a close, James Carter approached Sarah. "Miss Mitchell," he began, his voice gruff but sincere, "I want to thank you for this, for giving us a chance to know our grandchildren. I know it can't be easy for you." Sarah nodded, surprised by the lump forming in her throat. "It's not easy," she admitted. "But it's what's best for Jamal, Isha, and Marcus. They deserve to know all of their family." This first visit set the tone for the weeks that followed. Gradually, the tension began to ease as all parties focused on their shared love for the triplets. Sarah found herself relaxing more during the Carters' visits, even beginning to appreciate the additional support and the connection to the children's biological family. However, the path to harmony was not without its bumps. There were disagreements over parenting styles, with the Carters sometimes questioning Sarah's decisions. One particularly heated argument arose over the topic of religion, with the Carters insisting the children should be baptized in their church. "They need to be raised in the faith," James argued, his voice rising. "It's what our son would have wanted." Sarah stood her ground. "I respect your beliefs," she said firmly, "but I'm raising the triplets to make their own choices about religion when they're old enough. I won't force any particular faith on them." The conflict wasn't fully resolved, but Sarah's attempts at resolution had laid the groundwork for a more positive future. As she closed the door and turned back to her children, she felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination to make this unconventional family work, for the sake of the three little ones who had stolen her heart. The true turning point in Sarah's journey came on a crisp autumn day. 6 months after the court's decision, she had organized a small gathering in the local park to celebrate the triplets' first birthday. As she watched the Carters help set up decorations, chatting amiably with Lisa and her own parents, Sarah was struck by how much had changed. The party itself was a joyous affair. Friends, family, and neighbors all came together to celebrate not just the triplets, but the unique and beautiful family they had all become a part of. Jamal, Isha, and Marcus, now toddling around with growing confidence, were the stars of the show, their laughter and excitement infectious. As Sarah watched the Carters take turns pushing the triplets on the swings, she felt a shift within herself. The resentment and fear she had been holding on to, even subconsciously, began to melt away. She realized that by opening her heart to include the Carters, she hadn't lost anything. Instead, her family had grown, enriching the lives of her children in ways she couldn't have imagined. This realization marked a new direction for Sarah and her unconventional family. Instead of seeing the Carters as adversaries or even reluctant allies, she began to view them as partners in raising Jamal, Aisha, and Marcus. This shift in perspective opened up new possibilities for collaboration and mutual support. After the party, as they were cleaning up, Sarah approached the Carters with a proposal. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice filled with newfound confidence, "what if we started a foundation together? Something to support other families in similar situations, transracial adoptions, grandparents raising grandchildren, blended families. We've learned so much through our experience. Maybe we could use that to help others." The Carters exchanged surprised looks before James spoke. "That's actually a wonderful idea, Sarah. We'd be honored to be part of something like that." This moment marked the beginning of a new chapter for all of them. The foundation became a shared project, a way to channel their experiences into something positive and impactful. It also provided a neutral ground where they could work together, further strengthening their bonds. As Sarah drove home that evening, the triplets sleeping peacefully in their car seats, she felt a sense of peace and purpose she hadn't experienced since before the adoption. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she now faced it with confidence and hope. This turning point had transformed what was once a source of conflict into an opportunity for growth, collaboration, and positive change. Sarah, the Carters, and the triplets were no longer just navigating a difficult situation. They were pioneering a new model of family, one built on love, respect, and the shared goal of providing the best possible life for three very special children. As the seasons changed and the triplets grew from babies to toddlers, Sarah found herself in a period of profound reflection and personal growth. The woman who had once been defined by her career and her single status now saw herself primarily as a mother, but also as a bridge builder and an advocate for unconventional families. One crisp autumn morning, as Sarah watched the triplets playing in a pile of fallen leaves, she marveled at how much had changed in just over a year. Jamal, always the adventurer, was gleefully throwing leaves in the air, his laughter infectious. Aisha, the peacemaker, was carefully helping Marcus, who had gotten tangled in a particularly large leaf. Sarah thought back to the day she had first held them in her arms, tiny and vulnerable. Now they were walking, talking, and developing distinct personalities. Jamal was bold and curious, always the first to try new things. Aisha was empathetic beyond her years, quick to comfort her brothers or offer a toy to a crying friend at playgroup. Marcus, the youngest by a few minutes, was the jokester, his mischievous grin always signaling he was up to something. As she reflected on their growth, Sarah realized how much she had grown alongside them. The challenges she had faced, the legal battle, the integration of the Carters into their lives, the daily struggles of raising three children as a single mother, had forged her into a stronger, more compassionate person. She had learned to advocate fiercely for her children, while also being open to different perspectives. Her experiences had taught her the importance of cultural humility, leading her to actively seek out opportunities to learn about and celebrate the triplets' African American heritage. The foundation she had started with the Carters had become a source of pride and purpose. Through their work, they had helped numerous families navigate the complex waters of transracial adoption and blended families. Sarah found herself speaking at conferences, writing articles, and even considering writing a book about her experiences. Her relationship with the Carters had evolved in ways she never could have imagined. While they still had their differences, there was now a mutual respect and even affection between them. The triplets' birthday parties and holidays had become joyous family gatherings, with both Sarah's parents and the Carters coming together to celebrate. Sarah's circle of friends had expanded and diversified. Through support groups and community events, she had formed close bonds with other transracial adoptive parents, as well as with members of the local African American community who had taken her under their wing, offering guidance and support. Even her professional life had taken a new direction. Inspired by her experiences, Sarah had shifted her focus at work, specializing in transracial adoption cases and advocating for policy changes to better support diverse families. As she gathered the triplets for their afternoon nap, Sarah caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who had nervously waited for her adopted children over a year ago. This Sarah stood taller, her eyes shining with confidence and purpose. She had learned that love knew no color, that family was defined by choice as much as by blood, and that the greatest challenges often led to the most profound growth. As she tucked the triplets into their beds, kissing each one gently, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. The journey had been difficult, but it had led her to this moment, to this family, to this life full of love and purpose. Sarah knew there would be more challenges ahead. Raising three children of a different race in a world still grappling with issues of prejudice and inequality would not be easy. But as she looked at her sleeping children, she felt ready to face whatever came their way. The growth she had undergone, from a single woman focused on her career to a mother and advocate dedicated to breaking down barriers and building bridges, was just the beginning. There was still so much to learn, so much to do. But for the first time in her life, Sarah was excited about the journey, not just the destination. As Sarah sat on the porch swing, watching the triplets play in the yard with their grandparents, both sets working together to build an elaborate sandcastle, she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment she had never known before. The past year and a half had been a journey of love, growth, and unexpected connections. What had started as a personal desire to become a mother had blossomed into something far greater. A testament to the power of love to transcend boundaries of race, biology, and societal expectations. Through the challenges of adoption, the legal battle, and the integration of the Carters into their lives, Sarah had learned profound lessons about the true meaning of family. She had discovered that love was not a finite resource to be divided, but an expanding force that grew stronger with each person it embraced. The triplets, now happy and thriving, were growing up in a world rich with love and diverse perspectives. They were surrounded by people committed to honoring both their African American heritage and the unique story of their blended family. As she watched James Carter lift Jamal onto his shoulders, both of them laughing with pure joy, Sarah reflected on the theme that had defined their journey. Family is not limited by blood or race, but is created through love, commitment, and shared experiences. The foundation she had started with the Carters was flourishing, helping other families navigate the complex but rewarding path of transracial adoption and blended families. It stood as a living testament to the idea that from the greatest challenges can come the most beautiful opportunities for growth and connection. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over her expanded family, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude. The road had not been easy, but it had led her to this moment, surrounded by love, purpose, and the family she had always dreamed of, in all its beautiful, unexpected complexity.